Hello and welcome back to all of those who've been following this so far. To begin with, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all of you. I've had a lot of interest since the launch of my first video and have been in contact with some great people, so please continue to get in touch and I'd love to hear from you all. Right, to begin this video I'd like to give you a little background on Tolkien himself, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, actually pronounced Tolkien, but one of my little idiosyncrasies that I pronounce it wrong, but I'll try to improve on this. His first use of invented languages was one known as Cyrillic, which was invented by his cousins, but he took a keen interest and learnt the theory surrounding it. It was a simple set of syntactical rules, which meant that the reader would replace words with varying animal species. Following this, he created Natharin, this time by himself, which was a little more complex. It was what we call an a priori language, which means it doesn't have its roots in a pre-existing language, the same as Elvish. Admittedly, he would use elements from other languages, but the grounds on which he would build his languages are purely his own work. The only remaining words from Natharin are the following. Please forgive any pronunciation. If anyone knows it any better, please let me know. But the theory and the pronunciation guide to Natharin are very few and far between, but to the best of my knowledge would sound a little something like this. O Natharinos kuta navru kango lutos kavuna tiarana danamaga tia savru insa vunfata onsa ia meruta vuna maxtamana. However, we don't know the precise meaning of this phrase. But as I said, if anyone knows any more, please let me know. From this point, Natharin gradually became the original Quenya, but with the influence of Germanic languages and softer mutations in the pronunciation. During this time, Tolkien was working towards what later became known as the Oxford English Dictionary, and it was during this time that a lot of the foundation work was carried out for his languages. Following this, sometime serving in the First World War and successfully passing his degree at Oxford, he took up a post in the early 1920s at Leeds University as a professor of English. And his career continued, and during this time, through into the 1930s, it is known that Tolkien created 14 languages for his fictitious Middle-earth, some obviously more complete than others. And also, as I mentioned in my first video, he didn't create these languages for the books. He wrote the books in an attempt to become recognised as a linguist. However, as we all know, he became better known for his skills as a writer of the stories. And again, as we know of Elvish, was just a few lines in the books, and of course the Appendix E in Return of the King, the final part of the Ring trilogy, which anyone watching is not aware, is a very good place to start prior to looking on the internet, unless of course you're watching my videos. Anyway, I know that a lot of you are eager to start more of the Elvish writing part of this course, so we'll start now with some of the basics in this video, and I hope you appreciate what has been mentioned so far. For those of you who are learning, I urge you to find out all you can about the man behind the language. I can only speak from what I have read, but Tolkien had a fantastic life, and from the views he expressed through his talks and papers, makes for a fantastic read. And I only feel it respectful to mention a little about the man himself before getting into the theory. Okay, so we'll now begin with how the languages relate to the writing systems. Now, just as we see in Russian and Eastern European languages, there are two alphabets. The first most of us know being the Latin alphabet in English, representing A, B, C all through to Z. Now here is an example of Elvish written using the Latin alphabet. The other is more of a pictorial representation by comparison and uses symbols rather than letters, and possibly more commonly known as the Elvish writing system, and here is a slide of that. The Eastern European equivalent of this is known as the Cyrillic alphabet. An example is now shown of that on your screen. Now, just like the Cyrillic alphabet is used by Russians, Ukrainians and Serbians, amongst many others, they have each added and removed symbols to suit their own languages, although they do share similarities. For example, the phrase good morning in Serbian is dobro jutro, and in Russian is dobro utro. Very similar, but written slightly different using the Cyrillic alphabet, as you now see on your screen. Now, I can hear you all saying, why the is this guy talking about Russian? And the answer being is that Elvish writing systems are exactly the same as what I've just mentioned. The inhabitants of Middle Earth are much like those of Eastern Europe. They shared similar languages such as Valarin, Telerin, Quenya and Sindarin, but each required a slightly different way of representing their sounds, hence the reason for there being more than one way of writing in Elvish. So we have the various Elvish writing systems spanning from the Sarati all the way through to the Tengwa. Now here comes the important bit. Whilst the Latin alphabet, whether that be Russian, Elvish, English, whatever, represents a letter, and the Cyrillic or the Tengwa represent a sound. What's the difference, you ask? Well, the Latin T, for example, as we know it as a letter, but if we append this with the letter H, we get a sound rather than a letter, which is the th. This sound is what we call a phoneme, and it's the phonemes that are represented by the Tengwa as well as letters. Just to clarify, a phoneme represents a single unique sound within any spoken language and can be made up of one or more letters. So whilst all the sounds in our English alphabet are phonemes, they all consist of one single letter, and thus phonemes consisting of two or more letters are not something that native English speakers are familiar with. How do we identify a phoneme? Well, realising that we can pronounce two letters exclusively or collectively will give you this answer. Using the same example as the TH combination, let us take the word adulthood. This uses the TH combination in the middle, but each letter is pronounced exclusively as a TH sound. Adulthood. Now let's take the word theme. Again, the same TH combination is used, but this time the letters are pronounced collectively as the th sound, as opposed to two separate letters. Theme. This is a phoneme. So don't worry too much if it's not completely clear, as we'll go through this in more detail in upcoming videos. Now let's take the word Thingol, which some of you may know as a character from the Silmarillion. To those of you who have no frame of reference, this may be pronounced as Tehingol rather than Thingol, and using the Latin alphabet we'd have no idea how one would pronounce this word. However, by using a symbol to represent the TH sound, or theta as it's known, we can pronounce it correctly. So let's see how we will write this using the Tengwa. Right, first we would use a symbol for the TH, as we know it to be a phoneme. We will then use a symbol for the vowel I, which is commonly represented, being a vowel, in most Elvish systems as a marking over the previous letter, which again I'll explain in more detail in later videos. We then have the NG, which again is another phoneme, as we know this is to be pronounced collectively. But how do I know this, I hear you ask? The answer being simply that most Elvish languages will combine N and G to make the one sound, as they don't exist being pronounced exclusively, much like they are in the word angel. So again, in the same way as theta, the ng uses one symbol to represent the sound. We then have another vowel represented the same as the I by means of a marking above the symbol, and then finally the L. So we have either 7 letters or 5 sounds. As letters, we would pronounce this as tahingol, as I previously said, or as phonetic symbols, correctly as thingol. We will look a little further into the phonetics and the pronunciation of Elvish a little further on, but to wrap this example up, we will look at a few examples in the English language where phonemes are used, just to make sure this section has left you with sufficient knowledge to proceed, as this is paramount to understanding how Elvish works, not only in writing but in speaking and translating. We can see the th phoneme in use in words such as theme, throne and thunder, and we can also see the ng in words such as ring, wrong and finger in the middle. Other examples of phonemes would include the ch sound, the ch, found in chair or pinch, and maybe the ph phoneme in phrase or dolphin. So when one sound is made up of 2 letters, this is what we call a digraph. But we also have a linguistic scenario where a single sound can also be made up of 3 letters, such as the I sound heard in the word thigh. So thigh is made up simply of the th, which is a digraph, and the igh, which is known as a trigraph, th-I. The trigraphs are also used in Elvish languages, although the examples are a little bit more obscure than those found in English, given Tolkien's influence of Welsh and Finnish. But again, this is something we'll cover in the sessions to follow. In my next video, I'll look further into the different languages created by Tolkien, that conjugated to become what is known as Elvish, as it frequently is the misconception that the term Elvish refers to a single language. The term itself refers to the tongue originated by the Elvish race, the people, this tongue consisting of numerous languages. Think of it as an alien from another planet would refer to us on Earth speaking human, and within the human language we have many dialects, many languages, English, French, German and so on. The same is applicable when speaking of Elvish, albeit on a smaller scale. In the same way that we find elves speaking Elvish, you would find orcs speaking Orcish, dwarves speaking Dwarvish, and so on. Okay, so that concludes my second part, and once again I'd like to thank all of those who have subscribed and been in touch. Please continue to do so. My apologies for the delay in following up with this second chapter, but I will follow up with my third very soon. Thank you ever so much for watching, and again, any comments or questions, please post or contact me. I'll be very happy to hear from you. I will see you all again soon. Bye.